Good evening and welcome to this Zoom Candidates Forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kansas City, Jackson, Clay, and Platte counties. And to those that you might be seeing us on Facebook Live, welcome. I'm Sandy Eads and I live in Kansas City and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, if you can believe that. The League and the right for women to vote are celebrating our first 100 years this year in 2020. And I'm pleased to say that both are still very relevant and important as we embark on our next 100 years. The League of Women Voters are organized at the local, state, and national levels. And our membership is open to all people of voting age, including men, since 1974. There are over 700 member leagues representing 500,000 members and active supporters, serving millions of voters in every election cycle. We're a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates. We're issue-oriented, and after careful study of an issue and when consensus of our members on the issue is reached, then we advocate for those issues at all levels of government. The League is well known for voter services activities. That's our bread and butter. We take part in voter registration, as well as candidate debates like this one, and forums, while bringing focus to the issues. Our popular site, vote411.org, will give you information about your particular ballot, candidates, ballot issues, and more. Like everybody else, we're going high tech this year and live streaming this Zoom webinar on Facebook. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to the candidates for being responsive to voters. Our thanks to League member Cheryl Barnes, who's going to moderate tonight's forum. And we also want to thank Anitra Steele and all the members of the League's Forums Committee for planning and organizing this event. Because of the nonpartisan nature of our forums, campaign literature cannot be displayed in any way until the conclusion of the event. We welcome and appreciate the participation of these candidates. To minimize distractions, we'll turn off participant audio and video so you can concentrate on our Missouri House District 24 candidates. Our timekeeper and committee chair is Anitra Steele. If you hear a tiny bell ringing, it means the candidate has gone over his or her 90 seconds and he or she may be muted. The idea is to answer as many questions as we can get to. So now we're going to turn it over to Cheryl Barnes. Cheryl.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. And welcome to the candidate forum for District 24. There are 5 candidates running. We have 2 of the 5, and we're delighted to have them here. Joining us this evening are Connor Nowak and Emily Weber. And we'll start in alphabetical order. Connor, and we'll give you 90 seconds to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're running. And then all of your questions will be 90 seconds. You'll have 90 seconds to respond. And we'll go back and forth a little bit so you're not always first and Emily always second because of where she came in the alphabet. So Connor, would you introduce yourself and give us your #1 priority?
Yes, so thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and for everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Connor Nowak and I'm a Democrat running to be your next District 24 state representative. My path to politics was through education. I began my work in our community as a math teacher at Guadalupe Centers High School. There I worked with incredible colleagues, administrators, students, and families, but everyone was stretched thin. Teachers were working 70, 80, 90 hours per week. Students were staying at school sometimes 10 hours a day just to get caught up, and the system was unsustainable. So I decided to dedicate my career and my volunteering to helping provide resources to our schools and to our students. I developed an app to help teachers give feedback to their students. I founded a scholarship for undocumented students who were being charged international rates to attend college at Missouri colleges. And I now serve as the data director for a literacy tutoring nonprofit. in my work, I've realized that the problems that we were solving were ones that were created by a lack of investment by our state legislature in our schools and the communities around them. So I believe we need legislators who are deeply invested in our community, who understand the challenges that our schools face and the ways that we can help them to thrive. So my number one priority is to fund education adequately and equitably. And I'm ready to take my experience to Jefferson City as your next District 24 state representative.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, would you introduce yourself and give us your number one priority?
Yes, definitely. Hello. Thank you everyone for attending this virtual forum, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. My name is Emily Weber, and I'm running to be your next state representative. I grew up in a rural town in Kansas and actually moved here to Kansas City in the early 2000s to attend Kansas City Art Institute. I've built a career in communications and graphic design, but it's in political advocacy that I found the greatest opportunity to make a difference. I volunteered with Planned Parenthood. I'm on the policy committee with Climate Action KC. I also serve on the board for Greater Kansas City Women's Political Caucus and Women in Politics. I've worked to elect Democrats across the KC Metro for years. Connecting with voters has taught me about the values we share as a community and the importance of listening to our neighbors to create a shared vision for our state. I decided to run a year and a half ago because I was worried about the present and future of Missouri. We talked to the community early about their priorities, which helped us prioritize our top issues. The top issue that we continue to hear pre-COVID and during COVID is affordable healthcare. And that is the number one, the top issue that we continue to hear that I will fight for.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, we're going to go back to you again and with the first question. Do you support Medicaid expansion? Why or why not?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I am a strong advocate for Medicaid expansion. I actually gathered pre-COVID, I gathered signatures for the petition, and the conversations that I had in our community and outside of our community were amazing. They were very positive. The people understand why we are expanding Medicaid and why we need it. This will help us in so many areas. It will help people who, or will help Missourians making $18,000 and less, and then it will also help our veterans. It will help our rural hospitals to stay open, and it will help our the federal money actually coming in to help our state. So I 100% support expanding Medicaid.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak, same question. Do you support Medicaid expansion? Why or why not?
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. This is the right thing to do, and it's right for our state. And I'm really excited that I think we're gonna expand it. So here's why. First of all, it saves lives, it saves hospitals, and it saves us money. So we know that when folks have access to healthcare, that they are able to get the life-saving care that they need. Expanding Medicaid is the right thing to do to help ensure that folks have what they need in terms of their healthcare. Now, in addition to that, we're saving hospitals because we know there are rural hospitals in Missouri where folks don't have a high insurance access. And so as a result, when they go to hospitals, it's costing our rural hospitals to afford to pay them without any opportunity for reimbursement. So if we have Medicaid expansion, then we are going to be able to keep those hospitals and that healthcare for those communities afloat. And rural hospitals are begging for this to happen. And the last reason is that it saves money. Look, the reality is we're already paying for Medicaid in our federal tax dollars that are going to Washington, D.C. We need to bring those dollars back into Missouri and expand Medicaid.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Nowak, we're coming back to you. The gasoline tax hasn't been increased since 1996. At 17 cents a gallon, Missouri's gas tax is the lowest in the United States and our roads are in bad shape. Would you support an increase to help cover more than the $800 million in unfunded roads and bridges projects?
Yes, I would support a gas tax. I think that I think that what we've seen is our Missouri Department of Transportation is working and doing a really great job with not enough funds. The fact that we're 49th out of 50 in the country and that the gas tax hasn't changed in decades is a reason for us to support the gas tax. That said, I think that there are a lot of ways that we need to support our transportation infrastructure in ways outside of that and outside of thinking about cars on roads. And so I think we need to be thinking about things like public transportation within our state and things like, how promoting electric vehicle travel and expanding electric vehicle networks of charging stations throughout our state as well. So I think the gas tax is a problem that needs to be solved, even though it's not necessarily a popular one to help support our transportation infrastructure. But we need to be thinking about transportation more broadly than just simply what happens with cars on roads.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, same question. Gasoline tax hasn't been increased since 1996. Would you support an increase to help cover the more than $800 million in unfunded roads and bridges projects?
Yes, definitely. Nobody likes to hear increasing and taxing, but the gas tax hasn't been increased in so many years. And our infrastructure is crumbling. We need to invest in our infrastructure. Our roads and bridges, of course, need to be updated before it's too late and they crumble. But as we are also updating our infrastructure and making sure it's high quality, we should make sure it's beneficial to our environment too. I serve on the policy committee for Climate Action KC, and some small areas that we could change and improve overall infrastructure is thinking outside the box. For instance, like placing native plants around areas on the highways. This would help with decreasing in flooding, decrease mowing expenses. It's great for pollinators, and then it looks nice. But also improvements like this and putting into our budget for green stormwater will help with also some of our flooding issues on the roads too, to make sure that they don't continue to crumble. But then moving forward, yes, public transportation is something that we need to start investing in, especially in our rural areas. We need to make sure that we promote the electric vehicles and things like that also.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, we're coming back to you with this one. Do you support or oppose employment protections for Missouri's LGBTQ community? Why or why not?
I support protecting our LGBTQIA community. The Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, AKA MONA, has what it's been, I think it's 23 years they've been trying to get it passed. So the joke is she's 23 years old. It is about time that we protect our LGBTQIA community, especially our trans community. Our trans community continues to get attacked and murdered, and we do not protect them whatsoever. So we saw this past year, the GOP have been trying to put out as many anti-LGBTQIA bills and push them forward. Luckily, we attacked them all and we succeeded. But they showed us that they are pushing forward, and they are going to make sure that they are going to try to make sure that we have strict laws against our LGBTQIA communities, and we need to make sure that they are protected.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Nowak, same question. Do you support or oppose employment protections for Missouri's LGBTQIA community? Why or why not?
Yes, definitively. I support protections for our LGBTQIA community. I support not just employment protections, but other protections that would come under MONA, such as housing, et cetera. And so I think that this is a really, really important thing for all of the members of the community. As Emily was saying about particularly our trans community. I think another factor that we need to take into consideration here is, we often hear Republicans talking about making our state friendly for business, but we know that there are lots of Fortune 500 companies that would, or large employers that would not move to Missouri and create jobs if we didn't have protections in place for, for their employees and their workers. We've seen that happen in the past. And so, in addition to the fact that this is the right thing to do, we need to protect our citizens. It also could have economic impacts on our state, and I think that that needs to be. That if you're not convinced by protecting folks, then maybe you'll be convinced by the economic argument as well.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, we're coming to you with this one. The boundaries for District 24 extend from state line to Troost, the river down to north of the plaza. How do you plan to cross not only that Troost barrier, but to work with the rural legislators?
Yeah, definitely. So I come from two backgrounds. So I grew up in a very rural area in Kansas. My dad was a small business owner. His business was Weber Surge Dairy Equipment. So I grew up around a lot of dairy cows. I might be the only state rep that can milk dairy cows by hand. I don't know if that's a good trait, but I feel that, I have the opportunity and ability to go down and work and build relationships with our rural state reps and start building those relationships where we can talk on common grounds. And then hopefully afterwards, we can start talking about the issues that we disagree on and start really having some real conversations and pushing those. And that's what I'm looking to do with our rural areas. With the Troost boundaries, I've been working over on the Troost areas for years. And I'm trying to get better on going onto all the different areas of Troost to see what we can do and how we can improve those areas too. I know that there's a lot of different areas where we can start looking at the food deserts, the public transportation, the crime and violence, which that would go into common sense gun laws too. And then look for ways around there to start helping and build. And we need to invest into our areas down around Troost, but make sure when we are investing in our areas around Troost that we're not pushing lower income people out and just continue to push them farther east. So we need to make sure that we are allowing them to stay and giving them a cleaner community that we have been investing in and not pushing them out.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak, same question. Your boundaries for District 24 are from state line to Troost, the river down to north of the plaza. How do you plan to cross not only that barrier, but to work with the rural legislators?
Yes, so I've been lucky that in all the work that I've done, it's been citywide. So many of the students that I taught lived on the east side of Troost, as well as many of the students that I taught and their families were on the west side of Troost within the bounds of our district. In my current role, I have been able to work, our organization works in schools that are all over the metro area. And so I've had the opportunity to be in those communities and work with families and students and folks that are there and come to understand what's really going on throughout our city and not just in the specific bounds of the district. As far as working with rural legislators, I come from a family that crosses the political spectrum and crosses the sort of geographic spectrum as well. Folks in our family live in rural areas and live in cities and live in the suburbs. We always talk politics, and so it's an area I feel very natural speaking in. I think that one example of this is, I have a scholarship that supports undocumented students, which is a very, one would say a liberal issue. And we have folks that are Republicans that have donated to our campaign and that are to our organization because of the power of telling personal stories and talking to people about it. So my time is up, but that is how I plan to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Ms. Weber, we're coming to you with this one. What issues do you think should have priority in the 2021 Missouri legislature, and why?
Yeah, so definitely. So like I said, kind of in the opening statement, you know, a year and a half ago when we decided to run, I had basically a top 100 issue list that I wanted to fix in Missouri. And I knew that, you know, we had to narrow that down to 3 to 4 priorities. And the way we did that was we went out to the community very early on and talked to District 24 and really talked to them about what their top issues were, what they wanted to see fixed. And that's how we organized our issues. If I was going to be representing District 24, I wanted to know that I was representing the district to the best of my ability. And so our issues, you know, I've been making a lot of phone calls right now with COVID. So the conversations I've been having when I talk about our top 4 issues, I always hear you hit them. You hit every single one of the issues that I am also concerned about. And that is, you know, we need to increase access to affordable healthcare. That is absolutely number 1. And then also making sure and really fighting for the affordable part and realizing what we can do for the affordable part too. We need to have a quality public education system. There's a lack of state funding for our schools. And as your state representative, I would work to fund public schools adequately and fairly. Our reproductive health care continues to get attacked. I've been a volunteer with Planned Parenthood, and I'm actually the only candidate from the 24th district that's endorsed by them. I will always continue to fight for reproductive rights. And then I am committed to fighting for racial justice. Racial justice happens in our community all the time in education, healthcare, housing, voting, and employment. We can start policy change in those areas. Those are just our top priorities, but I'm also pro LGBTQIA, pro union, pro environment, and pro common sense gun laws.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak, your thoughts on the issues that should have priority in the 2021 Missouri legislature and why?
Yes, so the issue that I think is most important in 2021 is to make sure that we are funding our schools adequately and equitably. This is my number 1 priority, but it's a number 1 priority of voters in our district as well. And I think that this is critical for us. We came out of the 2008 recession, and we had an opportunity to really invest in our schools and build the future of our state from there. Because after the 2008 recession, we saw the largest expansion in our nation's economy that we've ever seen. And unfortunately, we cut taxes and we cut funding to schools, and we cut when it was too hard to fund schools, we just changed the formula. And so we're now in a situation where we're cutting funding for schools at extremely high rates, and we need to set ourselves up for a future now and start planning so that next time we have an economic crisis, we're not cutting funds from schools, because we can't risk losing a generation of students in their learning, in their education, especially those that are young and at critical ages. We have to focus on making sure that we get our students the education that they need. It's $1 in every $4 in our budget goes to education, and we need to make sure that we're focusing on putting those in the right places and getting them where they need to be.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, we're coming to you with going back to education. How do you feel about tuition scholarships and vouchers for private, religious, or secular schools that give donors tax credits or deductions?
Yes, so right now I do not support those right at this moment, because those are starting to take away from our public schools and starting to take away the funds from our public schools. I think we really need to start working on fairly funding our schools and making sure that they're all fairly funded. Right now, we've taken so much from our public schools that I am very worried about the future of them. I'm very worried about them opening up. They are working on less funds. Our current governor just took, what, $204 million from the budget. And so I think anything that's taking away from our public schools at this moment, I do not support until we start figuring out how to fairly fund our school systems.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak? Same question. How do you feel about tuition scholarships and vouchers for private, religious, or secular schools that give donors tax credits or deductions?
Yes, so I am opposed to these measures for a number of reasons, but the main reason is that the impact that they have on students. There was a large-scale study in Louisiana that measured how students who got vouchers to go to schools performed, particularly when they were coming from struggling districts. And what they found was that those students actually did worse than the control group. And so I'm very worried that that vouchers be used as a means of education reform, and that money would be taken away from our public schools. And so the main reason is that I don't think that they work in the way that they're intended to work, and that's not the best setup for kids. And so that's why I'm opposed to them. But also, I think the effects of that would be that there would be even less funding for our public schools, and we need to make sure that every kid has access to a high quality public school. And so I stand opposed to them.
Thank you. This question will go to Mr. Nowak. Past Missouri legislatures have overturned the will of voters, for example, on puppy mill legislation and on gerrymandering and donations, generally called Clean Missouri. The voters went back to work, 2 pages here, and got enough signatures to put it on the November ballot as Amendment 3. What is your position on Clean Missouri?
I stand in strong support of Clean Missouri. I believe that when voters went to the polls in 2018, they knew exactly what they were voting on, and they voted on it. And 2-1, they voted on Clean Missouri and in keeping those statutes. There hasn't been time for them to forget. There hasn't been time for them to change their minds. 2-1 is strong numbers and strong odds, and that's and we need to keep Clean Missouri for that reason. What we've seen is efforts by I think our Republican legislatures and frankly legislatures around the country that hold power to try and hold on that power. And the best way to break that power is by not having redistricting be taken over by the legislatures itself. I believe it needs to be in a nonpartisan commission that has been effective in other places, and it's something that we need to see in Missouri as well, so that our elected officials represent the will of the voters and not the elected officials themselves. So there have been some concerns raised about the impacts of redistricting, and I think that those, particularly in terms of representation, and I think that those need to be taken seriously, but I don't think that the way to take them seriously is to just scrap it and overturn it and pretend like voters never voted on it.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, your take on past Missouri legislatures have overturned the will of voters, for example, on puppy mill legislation and on gerrymandering and donations, generally called Clean Missouri. The voters went back to work and got enough signatures to put it on the November ballot as Amendment 3. What is your position on Clean Missouri?
I 100% support Clean Missouri. I voted on it. Like everybody else, and you know, the conversations I had with people when we started talking about when they overturned Clean Missouri, when I started talking to the voters and asking them what their take on it was, and they all knew what they were voting on. We all knew what we were voting on. This is something that's not new though. Our Missouri legislature continues to, you know, we vote for something as a ballot initiative, and then we bring it back to the state, and the state goes, no, we're gonna change it up a bit, and then we're gonna have you re-vote on it, and then waste taxpayer money on doing another campaign. So we know that we are going to have to always fight for ballot initiatives. We, you know, in Missouri, we have a great thing called ballot initiatives. So we give it to the people. The people vote progressively. We, you know, it's the right to work It's the puppy mills. It's Clean Missouri. If Medicaid expansion passes, we're going to have to fight to protect that one too. So we will always need to make sure that we fight to protect the vote of the people.
Okay, thank you. And we're coming back to you, Ms. Weber. Would you work for passing the Equal Rights Amendment in Missouri next year if you're elected?
100%. So Judy Morgan, I don't know if a lot of people know this. Judy Morgan, each year she would sponsor the bill to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, and of course it didn't really go anywhere in Missouri. But I will take on that. I guess if you want to say tradition, to make sure that we get Equal Rights Amendment passed in Missouri. It's beyond due time. You know, I'm a woman. I'm a graphic designer. I have been underpaid for the same job that my male counterpart, who has the same background, the same education, the same years, you know, they have been paid more than I have. And in an industry like that, you have to fight. So yes, it is about time that we pass the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Mr. Nowak, would you work for passing the Equal Rights Amendment in Missouri if you're elected to the state legislature?
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. There's not a whole lot to add. You know, this is long overdue, and it's time for us to get the law on the books. It's just, yeah, I can't really add. Yes, I would. I support it. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Okay, this is a two-part question, and we will go to you, Mr. Nowak, to start first. What is your position on a woman's right to choose? And what do you think? Why do you think the legislators keep chipping away at a woman's right to have an abortion for reproductive justice?
Yes. So my position is that healthcare, all parts of healthcare, should be between a woman or a pregnant person and their doctor, and that the legislature should not be making any steps to get involved with that, because it's a personal choice, and it's a woman, or it's a person's right, and so we've seen attacks against these rights, obviously particularly in Missouri, not just in the particularly egregious law that came to be last legislative cycle, but in different trap laws that have been effective in limiting women's access to reproductive health care. I think that those are wrong, and that we need to fight against them. And I think the reason, I can't say I know for sure the reason that our legislators keep fighting against them, except that I guess that they want to, you know, they don't share the same beliefs that that many folks have, and so I think that I suspect that this is an effort to get a Supreme Court case taken to the Supreme Court now that the Supreme Court has been redone, to try and overturn Roe v. Wade. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the bell, and so I would not support that happening.
Thank you. Ms. Weber, two-part question. What is your position on a woman's right to choose, and why do you think legislators keep chipping away at a woman's right to have an abortion for reproductive justice?
Yeah, definitely. My position on reproductive rights is the person has the right to choose. You know, like I've said before, I'm a longtime volunteer for Planned Parenthood, and again, the only candidate that's been endorsed by Planned Parenthood, NARAL, Vote Pro-Choice, Emily's List, and Greater Kansas City Women's Political Caucus, all organizations that help pro-choice candidates. We need to keep our reproductive health care safe and legal in Missouri. Our state government continues to try to restrict our reproductive health care access, but you know, I've always fought, and I will always continue to fight to protect those rights. Why is this happening? I believe that what you are seeing is the way that Missouri and some other parts of the United States continue to go backwards. They do not understand it. It's almost kind of like the attack on LGBTQIA rights, something that they do not understand, they want control of. So that is my thinking of why that this is happening. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't hear the bell.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question from the audience, and this is, and we will start with you, Mr. Nowak. How do you eliminate the structural discrimination in the way our schools are funded based on where they are? The structural discrimination in the way our schools are funded based on where they are.
That is a great question. So the way that I see this is that the more money that you ask local municipalities to pay for their schools, then the more of the inequities that we see in housing and in local properties, the more you see them exacerbated. So the way that we can solve this is by having a greater share of the funding that comes to schools come from our state legislature. So Missouri is 49th out of 50 when it comes to that proportion. We put the burden on our local school districts to pay for schools more than than all the other states, and we have neglected our duty at the state level to do that. And so I think that is a really incredibly important point that we can't understate, is that our state has to take up the reins. And what that does, not only does that put more money into the system and not put the burden on the property owners, but it also tries to help to make our state education system on the whole more equitable in general. So I think that's an incredibly important thing to do, and that's what I'm running to do, is to try and get more funding for education from our state, so the burden is not on the folks that live in the area, but it's a collective good, because education benefits our entire state, for personally and economically as a whole. So we need to be funding it more at the state level.
Thank you, Mr. Noah. Ms. Weber, how do you eliminate the structural discrimination in the way our schools are funded based on where they are?
Definitely. So it is, like Connor was saying, it's funding. Our state isn't doing enough on funding for our schools at this moment. But also with the funding issue, we need to make sure that we are fairly funding our public schools. So not just having certain schools get a allotted amount of most of the funding issues, and then leaving out some of our lower income schools. So we need to make sure that we are investing in those too, and making sure that they get the funds that they need to start improving.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question from the audience, and we will start again with you, Ms. Weber. We know that third grade is when a child transitions from learning to read to reading to learn. However, only 40% of Missouri's third graders are on the right track. How do we change this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we really need to start investing in our early pre-K. Early pre-K would be a way to start getting them young and getting them very early. Early pre-K also does more with education and will help improve kind of the workforce, with eliminating daycare and allowing the parents to choose an early pre-K to send their child at. And so I think if we start improving our education system from early on, that would improve our grading, our reading skills after the third grade level.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak, we know that third grade is when a child transitions from learning to read to reading to learn. However, only 40% of Missouri's third graders are on the right track. How do we change this?
Yeah, so I love this question because this has been the heart of the work that I've been doing for the last 4 years. I work for an organization that works to promote reading by third grade. And so I think that there are a couple of really important things that we can do. First of all, yes, early learning is key. What we've seen, and I'm the data director, so I look at the data, what we've seen in our data is that our pre-K students make tremendous growth and so we know that their minds are fertile, that they're ready to learn to read, and that there are a lot of important skills that they can learn that are sort of pre-reading skills that will help them to get caught up. Secondly, there's been a lot of new science in terms of how the brain learns how to read that's come out in the last 10 years. And it hasn't necessarily always trickled down to the school level. So we need to be investing in this in a couple of ways. First of all, we need to make sure that all of our teachers and our schools of education have the most updated versions in science and training that's coming out. Second of all, we need to be investing in tutoring. We know that tutoring is one of the most powerful ways that we can get students caught up. And we also need to be doing a lot of screening to make sure that we're catching these issues early and getting students to where they need to be. There's a lot of really exciting stuff. And if anyone wants to talk to me after this, I would talk to you all day about third grade reading. So thank you to whoever asked. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have an interesting question here from the audience. How do you plan to combat climate change at the state level in Missouri, specifically with Jefferson City working on many forms of preemption or taking away cities and counties' rights to local control and policies such as plastic bag bans and CAFO restrictions? And we will start with Mr. Nowak on that one.
Great. So yeah, so there are a couple of key pieces that we can help us at the state level reduce climate change. The first that we're talking about are building emissions. There are a couple that accounts for, I think it accounts for about 2/3 of our emissions is inefficiencies in our buildings. And so these can be solved. And what we know is that about 50% of the pollution comes from a very small number of these buildings. These are usually located in urban centers or factories or things like that. So we need to focus on getting those buildings updated and getting those making sure that there are audits, that there's investments in replacing their HVAC systems, et cetera. The second way is in terms of transportation and vehicles. And we need to move away from having one gas powered car per person. So we can do that in a couple of ways. We can invest in our public transportation system, which I think is essential. And we can also invest in electric vehicle charging stations, which there are plans from VW. There's some funding coming from VW to the states that Missouri could have access to get those things done. I think that whatever we do, we need to make sure that we are focusing on the communities that are most impacted and make sure that every dollar that we spend is helping our environment, helping our, helping promote equity and helping to be less expensive.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Weber, how do you plan to combat climate change at the state level in Missouri, specifically with Jeff City working on many forms of preemption or taking away cities and counties' rights to local control on policies such as plastic bag bans and CAFO restrictions?
Yeah, definitely. So like I said before, I'm actually on the policy committee with Climate Action KC. I understand, I've been talking to a lot of different state reps in Missouri, and I understand that the Republican state reps, a lot of them think that climate crisis is a joke. So I know that this is going to be a hard tackle to task. But I think we can start having the conversations of, like for instance, I made the comment about planting native plants around our highways. That will reduce mowing costs and it will decrease flooding, and it just looks pretty. Those things like that in those areas, we can talk to our Republican counterparts and talk to them about the how much money you are going to save if we do this, and start putting it towards things like that. Not really pushing climate crisis, but pushing how much money we can save as a state, and let's focus on that, and then pat on your back, you did something good for the environment. But also Missouri could also start thinking about putting together solar-ready homes, having financing options that are not getting demand charges. So this doesn't impact lower income neighbors by not allowing them to invest in solar. Was that a ding? Or
Well, yes.
oh, sorry. I barely heard it.
Okay. We have another one from the audience. And this, we're getting close to our wrapping up for the evening, and this is a perfect segue. And we will start with you, Mr. Nowak. How do the candidates feel that their careers within the district have prepared them to be a state representative?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that my career in the district has allowed me to work with and listen to the voters in the districts, and get to know what some of the challenges are. So, for example, I mentioned that I worked on developing an app to help support teachers. Well, in the process, I got to talk to, I had 30-minute conversations with about 100 teachers that worked in and around the district, just to talk to them. And the first question was, what are the problems and the challenges that you face? So I've been doing that for years. I've had the opportunity to watch my students grow up and go through, high school and college, and see some of the challenges that they've faced at different levels. And so I've worked in our district, and that has allowed me in the in the nonprofit and the education community, that has allowed me access to see a lot of different folks and to hear and listen from them. And I plan to bring all of the things that I've learned and I've heard over the course of my time into my role as a state legislator. That's why I wanted to run in the first place, was because of hearing all of the challenges that folks have faced.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Weber, how do you feel that your career within the district has prepared you to be a state rep?
Yeah, so, I have lived the experiences. I've been self-employed. I've worked for small mom and pop shops. I've worked for medium companies and big, huge corporations. I have been without healthcare many times, and prayed that I didn't get deathly ill or sick. Thankfully I didn't. But I've lived paycheck to paycheck. When I first moved here, I actually worked at Blockbuster in Westport. So I've been around, and I've also been very active in our community ever since I moved here. My parents, granted, we didn't agree on everything, but they did raise me to believe in giving back to your community. So I have been very active in our community, and then before even thinking about running, and then after running, it was, I was already active, so it was just digging deeper at that point. I believe all these experiences will help me to be the best representative I can be.
Good, thank you very much. I have kind of an interesting question based on league activities. What are you doing to get out the vote? What are you doing to jazz up your base, I guess? I'm not sure that's the right phraseology. And we'll start with you, Ms. Weber.
Yeah, so that is one of the biggest things that I wanted to push in this campaign was, when we first realized how many voters, well, okay, first, the district is about 35,000 people. 6,000 people vote in the primaries, which is such a low number, and it is very, very depressing. We're a progressive area, but we have such a low number on voters. So very early on, we were trying to push as much as possible when we were doing in-person events on making sure that, asking, are you registered to vote? And things like that, and pushing that as much as possible. Now afterwards, it's been a little bit more difficult, but we've been posting more on social media and our emails. A lot of our emails have been reminders of, the deadlines and what to do how to vote in Missouri, especially in Kansas City right now with the notaries and things like that, and making sure really getting out there. Again, like I said, I've made lots of phone calls within the district, and during those phone calls, I always ask if they're registered, how are they voting? Do they know how they're voting? And then I've helped a lot of people figure out, because a lot of them were confused on the mail-in ballots and different ways to do it, and notaries. So I've spent a lot of hours dedicating my time to just making sure that they understand how to actually vote and making sure that they have the information they need.
Thank you. Mr. Nowak, how are you working to get out the vote?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that's really exciting about having three new faces in the race this year is that we had the opportunity to kind of spread out and talk to a lot of folks and encourage them to vote. So it's been really exciting to speak with people during the primary and you know, feel that they're getting excited about voting. It's a particularly important election, this election, because Medicaid's on the ballot, and so we've been talking about that a lot. We had, in addition to sort of our typical campaign activities of calling people, of dropping literature at folks' houses, we had a special round of texting that we sent out just to make sure that folks knew how they could vote absentee, since that's a really important thing in this election. And so we've been talking to a lot of folks, talking them through, you know, a lot of calls. It has nothing to do with the campaign. It's just, wait, where do I send this form? When will they send it back? You know, things like that. And that's been really exciting and really fun. Another thing that, you know, I think that there's a heavily contested primary, and while there will be a general election, I'm looking forward to in the run up to the November election, you know, win or lose, I'm looking forward to being a part of helping turn out the vote for the November election. I'm sure Emily agrees in the same way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We will draft you into league activities, which mirror a lot of what you've been doing. Last question. We've asked you questions covering a lot of different topics, but what question do you wish that we had asked you, and how would you answer it in 2 minutes?
For who? Which candidate, Connor or Emily?
Thank you, Anitra. We'll start with Mr. Nowak.
Yeah, I think the question, and maybe this is the similar to the question that similar to a question you did ask, but the question I wish you would have asked is what is the most important investment that we can make in the future of our state? And here's how I would answer it: providing universal pre-K to 4-year-olds in our state, and hopefully 3-year-olds in our state as well. Look, if you lined up a whole, you know, panel of economists and you ask them what's the best way you can invest in the future of any state or jurisdiction, almost all of them would agree that pre-K is the way to go. It helps to provide valuable academic resources at critical times for students, in critical times being when their brains are developing the fastest. It helps them learn valuable social skills, and it helps them to get off on the right foot once they get into a slightly more heavily academic environment and in kindergarten and first grade, et cetera. Pre-K is also a tremendous value to families, because particularly when you have access to high quality pre-K, because then families have a place that they can send to their students to. They have flexibility in how they choose to spend their time. I would talk pre-K day and night, but I think it's the most important thing that we can do to set up the future of our state.
Yeah, and the bell rang, so Anitra won't let you. Ms. Weber, the one question that you wish we had asked and how you would answer it in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so 2 minutes. Well, I think let's start talking about gun laws. I am proud to have received the Moms Demand Action checkmark. I think it's past time. We need to start implementing common sense gun laws to save our state and save our community. Gun violence has been high here in Missouri, and it's been an issue that we continue to argue about. I will give you a short story. My husband is a gun owner. He obeys the law. He has a license. He did the trainings. He carries it legally the way he's supposed to. They are safely put away, and he understands that owning a gun is a privilege, and it's not just a right, it's a privilege, and you need to protect that privilege. If you mess up, you don't get to have a strike 2, strike 3, strike 4, or an oops. You know, that is taken away. And so my husband, who has been an avid gun owner for years, understands that we need common sense gun laws now because our community is at stake. You know, we need to make sure that our community is safe. And it's time to start saving the innocent lives here that have been affected by gun violence. We've all been affected by it. And, you know, I know that this is going to be an argument that we are going to have with the rural areas too, but we are not trying to take away your guns. And I understand rural areas where, yes, they need guns to protect themselves because they are out there by themselves and their next door neighbor, it could be 5 miles away. So, you know, they have rifles and things like that to shoot and hunt, but also for protection in case something does happen, or to make sure that they feel protected. That is not the same case in the city areas though, and we need to start really working on protecting our communities.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to go to closing remarks, and we will start with you, Mr. Noah, for 2 minutes.
Sure thing. Well, so I just want to say thank you again to everyone. This has been delightful. I'm so happy to have been involved. So thank you. You know, as a teacher, an entrepreneur, and a nonprofit leader, I've been working with families in our district since long before this campaign started. In that time, I've had the opportunity to listen to the many diverse voices in our district and hear about the challenges they face. And I've committed to spend my time finding, building, and scaling solutions to help address these challenges. I founded a scholarship for undocumented students, developed an app for educators. I facilitated tutoring partnerships for elementary schools. I've advised prospective teachers, and I've mentored young adults. But through my work and my volunteerism, I've seen students learn to read, students graduate from college, and students begin their careers. I will bring my experience, my passion, and my commitment to our district in my role as a state legislator. And a vote for me will ensure that we replace a powerful voice on education in Judy Morgan with the only teacher running in this election. Funding education adequately and equitably is my #1 priority, as well as increasing access to affordable healthcare, promoting racial equity, and reducing gun violence. Fighting for our students, for our families, and for our communities has been the work of my entire career, and I am proud to keep fighting for the families of District 24 as your next state representative.
Thank you, Mr. Noah. Ms. Weber, your closing statement, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you all for virtually coming out tonight. Again, my name is Emily Weber, and I'm running to be your next state representative. I've been very active in our community for years before deciding to run for office. We need better representation in our government, and I'm looking forward to representing the 24th District. I decided to run a 1.5 years ago because I was worried about the present and future of Missouri. If I was going to be a representative, I wanted to make sure I was doing the best of my ability, and that's why we went out early and talked to our community to learn about their issues and concerns about our state. I will work to increase access to affordable healthcare, work to fairly fund our public schools, fight for racial justice, and protect our reproductive healthcare. The more our government starts to look like what America actually looks like, full of diverse people of all backgrounds, the more decisions will be made that will truly promote equality for everyone. If you are thinking about running for something someday, we know women, especially women of color, have to be asked multiple times before they decide to run. I was asked repeatedly before I decided. Consider this your first ask. I want you to run for something, and we need your voice. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this forum on, and if you'd like to learn more about our campaign, please visit our website, emilyformissouri.com, and remember to vote August 4th and to vote yes on 2. Thank you.
Thank you both, and I'll turn this over to Sandy now.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're so thrilled when we have passionate, articulate candidates presenting their positions. It becomes very difficult to make a choice. But thanks for joining us. Before the election takes place, look at your ballot. You can find that at the League's homepage, www.lwvkc.org, and click on Vote 411. The main point is vote on August 4th. Again, thanks to our candidates and thanks to all of you for engaging. Good night.